My golden brother slept with my wife and testified against me. In my divorce to help her get more money. He lied under oath. So I had him prosecuted. He got probation and a record. I got full custody and peace. He got nothing from ex like she promised, except her blocking him after she lost. Sup Reddit. Never thought I'd be typing this out, but here we are. My brother slept with my wife, then had the nerve to lie under oath during my divorce to help her take me to the cleaner's big mistake. I'm talking criminal prosecution, permanent record, custody battle victory, and the cherry on top. She ghosted him the second she lost everything. But let me start from the beginning, because this whole mess is a masterclass in karma. I, 34 male, started as a junior engineer straight out of college, worked my way up to senior project manager over 12 years. Nothing flashy, just solid middle-class income, around $95,000 a year. Own a decent house in a good school district, drive a reliable SUV that's paid off, live within my means, the responsible type. You know? My younger brother Kyle, 31 male, has always been the golden child. Mom and dad treated him like he invented oxygen while I was just the practice kid they figured out their parenting mistakes on. Kyle could do no wrong. Literally. Got mediocre grades, but somehow that was finding his path. Worked random sales jobs, but that was exploring opportunities. Meanwhile, I busted my rear through engineering school, working 2 jobs, and got lectures about applying myself more. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When I graduated college with honors, they took me to dinner at Applebee's and split the bill. When Kyle graduated 3 years later with a communications degree and a 2.6 GPA, they threw him a party with 100 guests and bought him a car. Not a used Honda, a nearly new Accord with all the features. When I bought my first house at 27 with money I'd saved working overtime and weekends, they toured it once, said, "That's nice," and asked if I'd loan Kyle money for his security deposit. When Kyle moved into a luxury apartment he couldn't afford at 28, they bragged to everyone about his sophisticated lifestyle and how successful he was becoming. Every single family dinner was the Kyle show. He'd talk about whatever sales job he was working that month, like he was closing Fortune 500 deals instead of selling used Hondas at a dealership. Meanwhile, I'd mention winning a major infrastructure contract worth $2.3 million to the firm, and Dad would immediately change the subject to ask Kyle about his dating life or his latest business opportunity. Christmas was always particularly painful. Kyle would get expensive gifts, designer watches, high-end electronics, golf club memberships. I'd get practical stuff like tools or gift cards to Home Depot. When I pointed this out once, Mom said I should be grateful for anything, and that Kyle needed more support to get established. Kyle was 29 at the time, and had been getting established for 7 years. My wife Ashley, 32 female, came into the picture about 7 years ago. Met her through mutual friends at a barbecue. She worked in marketing for a healthcare company, seemed smart and driven, had this energy that pulled people in. We clicked immediately over discussions about work-life balance and future goals. Started dating, and within 6 months I knew she was the one. Got married after 2 years of dating in this nice outdoor ceremony that my parents complained was too casual. Looking back now, I missed every single red flag waving in my face. She was always comparing our life to her friends' lives. Why didn't we have a bigger house like Jen and Mike? Why didn't I drive a luxury car like her coworker Brad? Why couldn't we take elaborate vacations to Europe like the people on her Instagram feed? I'd sit down with her and our budget spreadsheet, explain we were actually doing really well, saving 15% for retirement, building the kids' college funds, had a 6-month emergency fund. We were ahead of most people our age financially. But she'd just sigh like I was being unreasonably cheap and controlling. We have 2 kids, Emma, 6 female, and Lucas, 4 male. Great kids, despite everything that happened. Emma's sharp as a tack, already reading chapter books above her grade level and asking questions that make me think she's going to be smarter than both her parents. Combined, Lucas is this bundle of pure energy who never stops moving, always building something with blocks, or running around the backyard pretending to be a superhero. They were my whole world. Still are. Every decision I made was about giving them a stable, happy childhood. I'd leave work at exactly 5 p.m. to make it home for dinner. Coached Lucas's little league team. Volunteered at Emma's school. The kind of involved dad I'd wished I'd had growing up. Ashley and I started having serious problems about 2 years before the divorce. She wanted more expensive everything. Bigger house in Scottsdale instead of our perfectly nice home in Tempe. Newer cars even though both our vehicles ran perfectly. Private schools that cost $20,000 per kid annually when the public schools in our district were excellent. I'd show her our finances, explain we were doing well, but not that well. We could afford some upgrades, but not everything she wanted all at once. She'd accuse me of being cheap, of not wanting her to be happy, of caring more about spreadsheets than her feelings. The arguments got nastier. She started going out more with girlfriends, girls' nights that turned into every weekend. She'd leave Friday after work and come home past midnight smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't hers. Started getting dressed up for these nights out like she was going to a club, not dinner with her married friends from college. When I'd ask about her night, she'd get immediately defensive. Why was I interrogating her? Didn't I trust her? Why was I being so controlling and insecure? She'd flip the script so fast, I'd end up apologizing for asking basic questions about where my wife had been until 1 a.m. on a random Tuesday. The distance between us grew into this massive canyon. We barely talked except to argue about money or coordinate the kids' schedules. She'd spend hours on her phone, angling it away whenever I walked by. Changed her passcode when she'd always left it unlocked before. Started taking phone calls outside or in the bathroom. Classic cheating behavior, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid and untrusting like she said Kyle was around more during this time. He'd drop by unannounced, always when I was at work. Ashley would mention it casually when I got home. Oh, Kyle stopped by to borrow the ladder, or Kyle needed help moving some furniture. I thought he was just being his usual inconsiderate self, not that he was sleeping with my wife in my bed. The thing about Kyle is he's charming in that superficial way that works on certain people. He dresses well on credit cards he can't pay off, drives a leased BMW he can barely afford, talks a good game about his career in sales, which was actually just jumping between different car dealerships every 8 months when they'd figure out he wasn't hitting numbers. He'd always had this easy confidence I never developed. Could walk into a room and immediately have people laughing at his stories. I'm more reserved, quieter, the guy who watches from the corner. Kyle's the guy buying rounds he can't afford to be the popular one. My parents loved Ashley. She laughed at Dad's jokes even when they weren't funny, complimented Mom's cooking even when it was mediocre, acted interested in their stories about people I'd never met. They'd tell me constantly how lucky I was, how I better treat her right, or someone else would snatch her up. When the marriage started falling apart, they immediately assumed it was my fault for not making her happy or not being romantic enough. The discovery came on a random Tuesday afternoon in March. I'd left work early because a project meeting got canceled. The contractor we were supposed to meet with had a family emergency, so suddenly my afternoon freed up. Pulled into my driveway around 2 p.m. and saw Kyle's BMW parked 2 houses down, like he was being subtle about it. Weird, but I figured maybe he was visiting a neighbor. Kyle knew random people everywhere from his various sales jobs. Walked into my house quiet because I wasn't sure if Ashley was home or out with the kids. Then I heard sounds from upstairs. My bedroom. The kind of sounds you really, really don't want to hear. Coming from your bedroom when you think you're home alone. Stood there frozen in my foyer for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 seconds. My brain was doing Olympic-level mental gymnastics, trying to explain this away. Maybe she was watching something on TV? Maybe she was exercising to a video? But I knew deep down in my gut, I absolutely knew what I was hearing. Could have stormed upstairs. Could have kicked the door down and confronted them. That's what happens in movies. But I'm an engineer. I solve problems systematically. And the problem here was that I needed proof and a plan, not just an emotional explosion that would make everything messier. Quietly walked back outside, got in my car, and drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away to think and calm down. Didn't confront them, didn't burst into the bedroom, didn't make a scene, just left. Some people would call that weak. I call it strategic. Sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours, drinking overpriced espresso that I barely tasted, and planning my next moves. First thing, I needed proof that would hold up legally. Not for my own certainty, but for the divorce that was now inevitable. Second, I needed to document everything before Ashley could hide assets or create false narratives. Third, I needed to protect my kids and my assets from whatever was about to happen. Started by pulling up our credit card statements on my phone. We had joint accounts, so I could see everything. Found charges I didn't recognize at hotels in our own city. The Hilton downtown. The Sheraton near Tempe Marketplace. Why would my wife need hotel rooms in the city where we lived? Found restaurant charges at expensive places we'd never been together. Found charges at a jewelry store. I definitely hadn't gotten any gifts recently. Every charge told a story. Lunches on weekdays when she'd said she was working through lunch. Hotel rooms on afternoons when she'd said she was at yoga class. The evidence was piling up, hidden in plain sight because I'd trusted her enough not to check. Checked our cell phone account through the provider's website. Ashley and Kyle had been texting constantly for months. Hundreds of messages, calls at weird hours like 11 p.m. or 6 a.m. All the evidence was right there in our shared accounts, documented in black and white, because I'd trusted them both enough to never think I'd need to look. Went home around 7 p.m. Kyle's car was long gone. Ashley was in the kitchen making dinner like nothing had happened, humming along to some pop music playing from her phone. The kids were in the living room watching cartoons, Lucas playing with blocks while Emma read a book. "How was your day?" she asked cheerfully, not even looking up from the stove where she was stirring pasta. "Interesting," I said, setting my keys down carefully. "Project meeting got canceled, so I had some unexpected free time this afternoon." Her face went pale for just a second, before she recovered. The wooden spoon stopped moving. "Oh, when did you get home?" "Around 2. The wooden spoon slipped from her hand into the pot of boiling pasta. She fished it out with shaking hands, still not looking at me. "I didn't hear you come in." I didn't stay long. We both stood there in this weird standoff, pretending everything was normal for the kids' sake, while the air between us was thick with unspoken accusations and denials. Emma looked up from her book, sensed something was wrong even at 6 years old, and went back to reading with this worried little crease in her forehead. "We should talk later," Ashley said quietly. "After the kids are asleep?" "Yeah, we should." Dinner was the most uncomfortable hour of my life. Made small talk with Emma about her school day, helped Lucas cut his pasta, all while my wife sat across from me, knowing that I knew. She picked at her food I forced myself to eat normally so the kids wouldn't worry. That night after the kids were finally asleep, Ashley tried to gaslight me. Said I was imagining things, being paranoid, that I needed to work on my trust issues. Maybe I should talk to someone about my anxiety. She'd been worried about my mental health lately, actually. When I pulled up the credit card statements on my laptop and turned the screen toward her, she switched tactics immediately. Anger replaced the concerned wife act. How dare I spy on her? What kind of husband tracks his wife's spending? This was financial abuse. I was controlling and manipulative. I just stared at her. "You're sleeping with my brother." She didn't even deny it. The fight went out of her posture, and she started crying about how I was never home, never paid attention to her, never made her feel special anymore. Kyle understood her. Kyle made time for her. Kyle treated her like she was important and beautiful. Kyle listened when she talked about her day. "Kyle's unemployed and living off credit cards," I pointed out calmly. "Of course he has time. He doesn't have a job or responsibilities." She screamed that I was cruel and heartless, that our marriage had been dead for years, that she wanted a divorce and couldn't be married to someone as cold as me anymore. I agreed immediately, which seemed to surprise her. Probably expected me to beg or fight for her or promise to change. Instead, I told her I'd file paperwork in the morning. She looked almost disappointed, like she'd wanted a bigger fight, more drama, me breaking down and giving her some narrative about the heartless husband who didn't care, but I was done. You don't fight for someone who's been betraying you in your own house. Filed for divorce the next morning. Didn't tell my parents, didn't tell Kyle, didn't tell anyone except my lawyer. Just went to the law office of Patricia Chen and started the process. Also opened new bank accounts in just my name at a different bank and redirected my paychecks. Ashley was about to get very strategic about money, and I wasn't giving her ammunition. My lawyer was this sharp woman named Patricia, who'd been practicing family law for 23 years. She'd seen everything twice and had zero patience for nonsense or emotional drama. "Affair with your brother?" she said, reviewing the notes I'd written out the night before. "That's going to play well in court. Arizona is technically a no-fault divorce state, but judges are still human. They don't like this kind of thing, especially when kids are involved." I showed her the credit card statements I'd printed, the phone records I'd downloaded, everything I'd compiled in my 3-hour coffee shop session. She actually smiled. Not a happy smile, but the smile of a card player who knows they're holding 4 aces. "Document everything from here on out," she instructed, sliding a legal pad across her desk. "Every interaction, every expense, every time she keeps the kids from you or says something inappropriate. Get a notebook and write it down with dates and times we're going to need ammunition when this gets ugly. And trust me, it will get ugly." It got ugly fast. Ashley moved out within a week, taking the kids to a 2-bedroom apartment across town that ate up most of her paycheck. Said she needed space, needed to think, needed to find herself away from my controlling presence. I pointed out she could find herself while the kids stayed in their home with their school and friends nearby, but she refused. She wanted the kids with her as leverage. The temporary custody arrangement gave me every other weekend and 1 weeknight dinner. It absolutely gutted me. Went from seeing my kids every single day, tucking them in every night, making them breakfast every morning, to scheduled visits like I was some stranger being slowly introduced to them. Emma cried every time I had to take her back to Ashley's apartment. She'd cling to me in the parking lot, asking why she couldn't come home with me. Lucas was too young to really understand, but would ask when Daddy was coming to their new house to stay. Breaking up the family didn't just break my heart, it broke our kids' sense of security and normalcy. And Ashley did it without a second thought because she wanted to punish me for not being the unlimited ATM she'd wanted. My parents finally found out about the divorce when Kyle told them his version. Of course, he spun it his way. I was an absent workaholic husband. Ashley felt neglected and alone. They'd fallen in love naturally over months of me being emotionally unavailable. Just two lonely people finding comfort in each other. My parents called me the day after Kyle told them. Not to ask if I was okay or offer support to express their disappointment that I'd let my marriage fall apart and was dragging Kyle into my marital problems. Did Kyle mention he was sleeping with my wife? I asked. In my house? In my bed? Silence on the phone. Then Dad cleared his throat and said that was between you and Ashley, and I shouldn't drag Kyle into your marital problems. The man who helped destroy my marriage was somehow not involved in my marital problems. He's your brother, Mom added. Family should forgive family. Funny how that only applies when Kyle needs forgiveness, I said, and hung up. The divorce proceedings officially started 3 months after I filed. Ashley wanted the house, primary custody with minimal visitation for me, child support calculated at the maximum rate, half my retirement accounts, and continued health insurance coverage. Her lawyer was this aggressive guy named Thompson, who specialized in taking husbands to the cleaners in divorces. The first settlement conference was a complete joke. Thompson started with demands that would have left me bankrupt and homeless, paying so much in support I'd barely be able to afford an apartment. Patricia countered with evidence of Ashley's affair and wasteful spending of marital assets. Thompson called the affair irrelevant in a no-fault state and the spending normal household expenses. $60 room service charges at the Hilton downtown are normal household expenses? Patricia asked, sliding the statement across the table. When she lives 3 miles away and has a fully stocked kitchen? Thompson had no good answer for that. He moved on to attacking my parenting, suggesting I worked too much to be a primary custodial parent. This is where Kyle made his fatal mistake. Ashley's legal strategy shifted after that first conference. If she couldn't claim I neglected her financially, she'd claim I was an unfit parent, that I had anger management issues, that I was controlling with money to the point of abuse, that I prioritized work over family constantly, that the kids were scared of me when I was stressed. All lies, but her lawyer was going to present them as facts, and Kyle agreed to be her star witness. Got the notice about his deposition about 2 weeks before it was scheduled. Patricia called me at work to discuss strategy. Your brother's going to testify that you were a bad father and husband, she said bluntly. That's their play. They're going to use his testimony to paint you as someone who shouldn't have primary custody. Can they do that? They can try, but he's going to have to testify under oath, which means everything he says is legally binding. If he lies, that's perjury. And given that he was having an affair with your wife, his credibility is already questionable. The deposition happened at Thompson's office on a Wednesday morning. Me, Patricia, Ashley, Thompson, Kyle, and a court reporter with her little machine. Kyle showed up wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Probably bought it on credit specifically for this appearance, looking like he thought he was about to testify at some high-profile trial instead of his brother's divorce. Thompson started gentle, establishing Kyle's relationship to me for the record. Then he got into the character testimony that was clearly rehearsed. In Kyle's version of reality, I was this workaholic tyrant who ignored my family for career advancement. I'd routinely miss important events because of work deadlines. I'd snap at Ashley over minor household things when I was stressed. I'd refuse to spend money on anything fun for the family, keeping everything on a strict budget. The kids walked on eggshells around me. Emma had told him once that she was scared to ask me for things because I always said no. All lies, complete fabrication. But here's the thing that Kyle didn't fully understand. He was under oath. Every word was being recorded by the court reporter. Patricia sat next to me taking notes, and I could see this small smile on her face that told me Kyle was hanging himself. Thompson asked for specific examples. Kyle provided them, adding detail after detail about incidents that never happened. Stories about me missing Emma's school play, about me refusing to let Ashley buy clothes for the kids, about me throwing a coffee mug at the wall during an argument about credit card bills. Patricia's turn came after Thompson finished. She started simple and friendly, like she was just curious. Wilson, how often would you say you visited your brother's home in the past year? I don't know exactly. Maybe once a month or so? Once a month, Patricia repeated, making a note. And these visits, were they always when your brother was home from work? Well, Sometimes he was at work during the day. So you visited your brother's home when he wasn't there? Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sometimes Ashley would invite me over for lunch or whatever. I see. And during these visits when your brother wasn't home, were you and Ashley ever alone together in the house? Thompson objected that this wasn't relevant to the custody evaluation, but Patricia argued she was establishing bias and credibility. The objection was overruled. Sometimes we were alone, yeah, Kyle admitted. And did you and Ashley ever engage in a romantic or physical relationship? Long pause. Kyle's face went red. Finally, yes. While she was married to your brother? Yes. And you're here today to testify that your brother was a bad husband and father? That's not... I'm just saying what I observed over the years. What you observed during your romantic relationship with his wife. The deposition went downhill from there. Kyle stuck to his prepared stories about me being a bad father. But Patricia had completely shredded his credibility. Every statement was now tainted by the obvious bias of him sleeping with my wife and wanting to help her in the divorce. But it got worse for Kyle when Patricia started asking about the specific incidents he'd mentioned earlier. You testified earlier that you witnessed the defendant miss his daughter's school play last spring, correct? Yes, that's right. And you attended this play? Yes. Ashley invited me to come since you weren't going to be there. Patricia pulled out a printed calendar from her folder. That school play was on April 15th of last year, correct? Emma's class did a production of fairy tales? I think so, yeah. And you're certain the defendant wasn't there? You remember this clearly? Yes, I remember Ashley being really upset about it. She told Emma that Daddy would be there and then you didn't show. Patricia slid a photograph across the table. It showed me at Emma's play, standing in the back of the auditorium with other parents. Emma visible on stage in her costume. The photo was date-stamped April 15th from my phone. How do you explain this photograph showing the defendant at the play you claim he missed? Kyle stared at it. His mouth opened and closed. Maybe I'm thinking of a different event. Maybe you're lying under oath? Thompson objected, but the damage was done. Patricia went through incident after incident, the coffee mug thrown at the wall. Never happened, and Ashley had never mentioned it before Kyle's testimony. Me refusing to buy clothes for the kids? She had credit card statements showing regular purchases at children's clothing stores. Me missing Emma's birthday party? She had photos of me at the party I supposedly skipped. Every story Kyle told, Patricia had evidence contradicting. Text messages placing me where I said I was photos, proving I was at events he claimed I missed. Credit card receipts, calendar entries. She'd done her homework, and Kyle had walked into the deposition completely unprepared for someone to actually fact-check his lies. By the end of the 2-hour deposition, Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. He'd walked in confident, probably thinking he was helping Ashley and hurting me, and walked out realizing he'd committed multiple counts of perjury on the official record. After everyone left, Patricia looked at me seriously across her desk. Your brother lied under oath in a legal proceeding. Multiple times. That's a crime. You could press charges if you wanted to. What would that accomplish? He'd face criminal penalties. Probably probation for a first offense since he has no record, but it would be a permanent conviction on his record. He'd have a criminal conviction for perjury. It would destroy his credibility permanently, affect his job prospects, follow him for life. I thought about Kyle growing up as the golden child, never facing real consequences for anything, always getting bailed out by mom and dad, screwing up job after job but landing on his feet, sleeping with my wife in my house, then having the audacity to lie in court to help her take my money, and my kids do it, I said. Patricia filed a criminal complaint with the county attorney's office that same week. Included the full deposition transcript, all the contradicting evidence, everything the county attorney reviewed it, and agreed to prosecute. Perjury cases are apparently rare because they're hard to prove beyond reasonable doubt, but Kyle had basically gift-wrapped the evidence with a bow. Kyle got arrested 3 weeks later at our parents' house, where he'd been staying after his apartment lease ended, and he couldn't afford renewal. Mom called me at work crying, asking how I could do this to my own brother. I reminded her that Kyle lied under oath to help my wife take my children away from me. But he's family, she wailed. How can you destroy his life like this? So am I, Mom. So am I. And he tried to destroy mine first. She hung up on me. The criminal case moved faster than the divorce. Kyle got a public defender who immediately advised him to take a plea deal. The evidence was too strong to fight. Video recording of him lying under oath documented proof those lies were false. His attorney told him going to trial would be suicide. Kyle pled guilty to 1 count of perjury in the 3rd degree. Got sentenced to 18 months supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record. Could have been worse. Perjury can carry jail time. But for a first offense with a plea deal, the judge went lenient. The plea hearing was brief and painful to watch. Kyle stood before the judge looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The confident salesman persona was completely gone, replaced by this defeated guy in an ill-fitting suit. The judge asked if he understood he was pleading guilty to lying under oath in a legal proceeding. "Yes, Your Honor," Kyle mumbled. "And do you understand this will be a permanent mark on your criminal record that will affect employment, housing, and various other aspects of your life?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge sentenced him, then added a personal comment. "Mr. Wilson, you betrayed your brother, you betrayed the integrity of the court system, and you betrayed yourself. This kind of behavior, lying under oath to help someone in a divorce proceeding, strikes at the heart of our justice system. I hope this conviction teaches you that actions have consequences, and that truth matters. Good luck to you." Kyle walked out of that courtroom with his head down. Our parents were there in the gallery, glaring at me like I was the villain in this story. Dad looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. Mom was crying into a tissue. I just left. Had nothing to say to any of them. The criminal conviction destroyed Kyle's testimony for the divorce case. Patricia immediately filed motions to have all his statements thrown out as unreliable and tainted by perjury. The judge agreed. Every single allegation Ashley's lawyer had built on Kyle's testimony collapsed like a house of cards. Thompson tried to pivot to other arguments, but he'd bet everything on character assassination based on Kyle's witness testimony. Without that, Ashley's case fell apart. She'd spent marital assets on an affair. She'd moved the kids out of their stable home environment, and she had no legitimate claims about my parenting or fitness as a father. The final divorce hearing was almost anticlimactic after everything that had happened. Patricia presented evidence of the affair, the wasteful spending, my consistent involvement in the kids' lives through school records and photos, and witness statements from teachers. Thompson argued I was being vindictive, that affairs happen and shouldn't affect custody, that Ashley deserved a fair settlement for her years of marriage. The judge wasn't buying any of it. "Mrs. Wilson," the judge said, looking directly at Ashley, "you engaged in an extramarital affair with your husband's brother. You used marital funds to support that affair, and then you coordinated with that same brother to provide false testimony under oath about your husband's parenting abilities. That demonstrates a pattern of deception and extremely poor judgment that concerns this court greatly when considering custody arrangements." Ashley started crying. The judge was completely unmoved. Final order. I got primary physical custody with Ashley having every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. I kept the house since I could afford the mortgage, and it was better for the kids' stability. She got nothing from my retirement accounts since she'd wasted marital assets on the affair. Child support was minimal, since I had the kids. The majority of the time she was ordered to pay back the marital funds spent on hotel rooms, dinners, and gifts related to the affair. About $8,000 total. Ashley looked like she'd been slapped. Thompson tried to argue the settlement was unfair and punitive, but the judge had made her decision. We signed the papers that afternoon and it was over. Walking out of that courthouse with primary custody of my kids was the best moment of my life since they were born. Emma and Lucas were coming home for good. No more every other weekend visits, no more Wednesday dinners in restaurant booths. They were coming home where they belonged. But here's where the story gets even better, and I'm not going to lie. This part gave me more satisfaction than the custody win. Turns out Ashley had promised Kyle things during their affair. She'd painted him this whole fantasy about their future together. Once she got her settlement, which she'd estimated would be substantial based on Thompson's initial demands, they'd be together openly. They'd take the money, get a nice place together, maybe even move to California, where nobody knew them. They'd build this new life free from my controlling presence. Except she got nothing. No house, no retirement money, minimal child support that barely covered her share of the kids' expenses, plus a court order to pay me back $8,000. She didn't have. Kyle got a criminal record and 18 months of probation. Not exactly the fairy tale ending they'd planned while betraying me. My friend Eric works at the Scottsdale car dealership, where Kyle had been trying to get hired after leaving his previous job under questionable circumstances. They ran his background check after his interview and found the perjury conviction. Immediate rejection. Turns out car dealerships don't love employing people who lie under oath in legal proceedings. Bad look for the industry. Kyle tried to contact Ashley after the divorce finalized. She blocked his number immediately. He showed up at her apartment one evening. She threatened to call the police and file for a restraining order. The fantasy relationship died the second reality hit, and there was no pot of gold at the end. See? Ashley never actually loved Kyle. She loved what she thought he represented: spontaneity, excitement, attention, someone who'd promise her the moon and expensive dinners. But Kyle couldn't deliver anything real. He was unemployed with a criminal record. He was just the weapon she'd used to try taking me down in court, and once that weapon failed spectacularly, she had no use for him. Kyle tried explaining this situation to our parents, looking for sympathy and support. They didn't want to hear it. They were too busy being disappointed in both of us for destroying the family with your drama. I tried explaining to them that Kyle had destroyed the family when he slept with my wife and committed perjury, but Dad literally cut me off mid-sentence. We don't need to rehash this. What's done is done. We need to move forward as a family. Yeah, I agreed. What's done is done. Haven't spoken to my parents in over a year now. They made their choice when they defended Kyle's indefensible behavior and blamed me for pressing charges, so they don't get access to my kids. Emma asks about Grandma and Grandpa sometimes. I tell her they're very busy with their own lives right now. It's easier than explaining that they valued appearances and their golden child over their grandchildren. Kyle's life spiraled after the conviction. The criminal record made job hunting nearly impossible. Every application asks about convictions. Every background check reveals his perjury charge. He finally ended up working at a call center for $14 an hour. Brutal work handling angry customers all day for barely more than minimum wage. His BMW got repossessed after 3 months of missed payments. He had to move in with a former college roommate because our parents finally cut him off financially, not because they thought he was wrong, but because they couldn't afford to keep supporting a 31-year-old man indefinitely. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, he's working 2 jobs just to make rent and probation payments. His probation officer requires regular check-ins, proof of employment, completion of his community service hours, and random drug tests. All the consequences he never faced growing up finally caught up with him in one devastating blow. Ashley struggled too in different ways. She'd been so confident she'd take me to the cleaners in the divorce that she'd already been planning how to spend the settlement money. She'd told her friends about the huge payout she was getting, probably exaggerating the numbers to sound impressive and successful. When reality hit and she got nothing, she had to walk back all those claims. Had to admit to her friends she'd gotten nothing in the divorce. Had to explain why she was the one paying money back to me. Her social circle started avoiding her, some because they disapproved of the affair with my brother, others because she'd been exposed as someone who'd lie and manipulate to get what she wanted. She tried dating, but having 2 young kids every other weekend, and a reputation in our social circles as someone who sleeps with family members isn't exactly attractive to quality men. She'd post on social media about new beginnings and finding herself and focusing on personal growth, but anyone paying attention could see she was miserable with how everything turned out. The kids adjusted better than I'd hoped, though the first few months were genuinely rough. Emma had nightmares about the family breaking apart. Lucas would cry randomly about missing his mom even though he saw her regularly. But we established solid routines that gave them security. Homework at the kitchen table every night after dinner. Dinner together at 6 p.m. no matter what. Weekend activities they got to choose. Park, movies, museum, whatever they wanted. Bedtime stories every single night without exception. The consistency and predictability made them feel safe again. Emma started reading even more, devouring books about strong kids overcoming challenges and building new lives. We never talked explicitly about the divorce details, but I think she understood on some level that bad things had happened, and now we were building something better. Lucas just needed stability and routine, knowing where he'd sleep each night, when he'd see mom, when I'd be home from work. The consistency made him feel secure again, and the nightmares stopped. Ashley's weekend visits were awkward at first. She'd show up looking resentful, like I'd done this to her instead of the other way around. But over time, even she had to admit the arrangement was working well. The kids were thriving under the stable routine. I also made absolutely sure the kids knew none of this was their fault, that sometimes adults made mistakes and hurt each other, but Emma and Lucas were loved by both parents, that our job was taking care of them, not the other way around. They weren't responsible for fixing anything or choosing sides. My coworkers at the firm noticed the change too. Before the divorce, I'd been distracted and stressed, making small mistakes and missing details. After getting custody and settling into our new routine, I was more focused than I'd been in years. I got promoted to lead project engineer with a $15,000 raise. Used that extra money to set up proper college funds for both kids with automatic monthly contributions. Bought Emma this advanced reading tablet she'd wanted. Enrolled Lucas in the kids' soccer league he'd been begging to join. Took them on a modest vacation to San Diego. Nothing fancy, just time together at the beach building sandcastles and visiting the zoo. Simple things that Ashley would have called boring and insufficient. But the kids talked about that trip for months. Emma kept a journal of everything we did. Lucas made me promise we'd go back next summer. 1 year after the divorce finalized, I got an interesting message. Kyle sent me a long text message apologizing for everything: the affair, the testimony, the lies. He'd been in therapy that was mandated by his probation, and his therapist had made him realize how messed up his actions were. He wanted to make amends and rebuild our relationship. I read the whole message. Then I deleted it and blocked his number. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.